Hello, my name is Melly Hernandez Verdesia, and I'm gonna do my second book club assignment, and I'm reading A Stolen Life by J.C. Dugard. So, the last assignment I ended with Easter, so now I'm gonna begin with Easter and finish with a second pregnancy. So in this section of A Stolen Life, JC Dugard's experience shifts in a very big way. So earlier in the book, the focus is on shock, control, fear, survival. But in these chapters, something changes because we begin to see not only trauma but adaptation, not only control but also emotional complexity. So, from the chapter Easter to the discovery of her second pregnancy, JC's story becomes about, motherhood and inside captivity. So, this part of the book stood out to me because it shows how survival evolves over time. At first, survival meant enduring abuse, but now it means protecting her child, managing her emotions, creating stability in an environment built on instability. These chapters are difficult, but they're so deeply revealing about resilience. They were very difficult to read just because of some of the themes that were happening towards the end of the chapters, but it's it's worth it to read about her story. So, beginning with Easter, during this chapter, she was having a lot of emotional conflict because she reflected a lot on holidays that she used to celebrate with her parents. She remembers traditions, um, family time, and what it felt like to belong, just somewhere where she's safe. This reflection is important because it shows that even after years of being in captivity, her memories are still very much alive. She hasn't fully lost who she was. At this time, Philip isn't around very much. Nancy tells her that he is far away on an island, fishing and enjoying himself. And JC feels, relieved because the assaults are happening a lot less frequently. But obviously, sometimes, even though she's being held captive by him and Nancy, she does begin to feel kind of strange when he's not there. Obviously, this doesn't mean that she loves him or that she cares for him in any way. It just shows how isolation really affects the brain, because when your entire world is reduced to two people, their absence just feels kind of unsettling. Now, this is a psychological survival response because humans, adjust to routine. Like even such routine as this. Um, but eventually, when he comes back after some time, she is told that he wasn't out on an island at all. He was actually just in jail. And that moment just reveals how control her access to information is. Even the basic truth is hidden from her. And during these chapters, I thought a lot about Nancy because during this time, Nancy and her were kind of talking a lot every single day. They were spending time together. Nancy was gossiping to her about some of her the people that she worked with and yada yada yada. But in my mind, I was thinking, why doesn't she just let her go? So either she is being just extremely brainwashed by Philip, and she has no mind of her own, that she is blindly following his every word and keeping JC there, or she is also enjoying what's happening to JC, therefore she keeps her there for him. And I thought that part was very disturbing. I just don't understand what was going through her mind, because during this moment, JC, she could have let JC go. She could have gone to the police, she could have said something, but she just chose not to. So I thought it was very interesting. Now, before the pregnancy, there is a Christmas chapter which also stands out emotionally because she, excuse me, she receives a diary, a tent, and a kitten. And first, I'll talk about the diary because for her, this was a very big deal. She was able to write her thoughts and everything that she was thinking at that moment and about every single day of her life. And now, when she got her diary, she started talking about her kitten, you know? And she wrote her name on the top of the page. She wrote her real name, JC Dugard, in the diary, but Philip just forces her to rip the page out. And in the ebook, there is actually a picture of the paper, and the top right of the page is just like ripped out like this. And that act is just, it's like he's trying to erase her identity completely. Even writing her own name is seen as something dangerous for him. Now the tent, she the tent represents this amazing personal space for her. Obviously the kitten represents a lot of companionship, but eventually the kitten is taken away to another environment, and she does feel at a loss like she usually is. But even with the tent, she felt a little bit normal for a while because it just gives her this like separation. Obviously not safety, but she feels kind of separated from the world when she is in this place. She was allowed to have her books, her blankets, her things just in one small place where she could always be. Obviously, when he assaulted her, she had to leave the tent as it was too small of a space for her. And again, she was just dissociate during these moments and try to think about something else until the moment was over and she was able to go back to her safe space. And it just shows how completely um, controlled she is, and how it's not just physically but also psychological, Philip's control on her. Now, um, Philip and Nancy eventually suggest that they've noted, well, not suggest, but they've noticed some changes in JC's body because they've seen her kind of waddle around while she's walking, and she's kind of like gaining weight. And honestly, she didn't even notice it at first. She thought it was something normal. She didn't even notice that she had been walking like in a weird way. She noticed the weight gain, but she didn't fully understand what it meant. And this really shows how disconnected um she is from normal teenage development. So she realizes that she is pregnant now, and something just shifts for her. She doesn't really feel this fear that the baby will be taken away from her. She actually feels this big attachment because she knows that she will try to protect this baby with all of her might. And she starts beginning about thinking about how to convince them to let her keep her baby. She was deeply afraid of the baby being taken away from her, especially by Philip, because she didn't know if Philip would be happy now that she was pregnant. So she really wanted to keep that baby, not just because it's hers, but also because she felt like this attachment to the baby as well. And for the first time, she actually has something that is hers. And when they do find out that she's pregnant, Philip is actually very, very happy. Um, they start reading, they start watching a bunch of these TV shows about doctors and just pregnancy and stuff like that, kind of to prepare for the pregnancy. And as JC talked about it in the book, she was very obsessed with making sure that everything would go smoothly. She had her own favorite show. She was watched every single day, and she really wanted to take care of the baby when it actually arrived. Now, when they found out that she was pregnant, they took her over to this trailer. On the way there, the Philip she had her belly already, and Philip told her to get under the car seats. That way nobody could see her. Not only that, but he actually put boxes all around where she was hiding in the seats so that nobody would actually see her, even though it would be very, very difficult for somebody to actually see her when she's underneath the seats. But obviously, she didn't want to upset Philip. She didn't want to do something that he would scream about her at her for. So she just lay down there until they got to the trailer, and she remembers being excited because this is the first time that she has left the house since her kidnapping. Obviously, she is still trapped, and this moment just matters. And it just reminds us how small of her world has been since she's been kidnapped at the age of 11. And she's now 14, having her first baby, which is extremely young. And, you know, it just shows her how the outside world has really changed and continued without her. So when they get to the trailer, she is in awe. She just keeps walking around. She wants to see everything just because it's a new environment for her. And I thought that part was kind of sweet just because she was very excited for something once in her life since she's been kidnapped, aside from having the baby. But it's like, in a way, to her, what's like if you were to go to Disneyland, you're seeing something new and amazing for the first time, which is so sad because the reality is that she is being held someplace where she can't go out or do anything that she wants. So we move on to the part of the birth in the book. So the birth is described in intense detail because it shows how the morning of and just the day of, she's been feeling this immense pain unlike anything she has ever felt before. Um, she eventually her water breaks now and the pressure changes in her body, but then the contractions just intensify and everything just comes back all together, and leading to her water breaking. Neither Philip or Nancy were there for her all day. She was alone and in pain at 14 years old, about to have her first child, and she was all alone. And the only reason that she wasn't alone for her birth is because they somehow came late at night and saw her about to have the baby. Now, as she is giving birth, she pushes and pushes and pushes, but the baby just won't come out. And eventually, they realize that it's because the umbilical cord is wrapped around the baby's neck. And this moment is terrifying because there is no hospital, there's no medical team. The only person that's there is Philip, who has read and watched a lot of TV shows and obsessed over having a baby. And in the book, he claims that, oh, don't worry, I'm here. I know everything that I need to do. Like, no, you don't. You're not a doctor. But that was very infuriating because he is the reason why she is held captive and having a baby in the first place at 14 years old. So that part was very frustrating for me because he's acting like such a martyr, like he's doing everything in the world that he can for his baby. like that. He should be in jail. Um, but eventually the baby is delivered. Nancy grabs her, cleans her up, and JC eventually pushes out the placenta, and she holds her daughter. Um, in that moment, she becomes both victim and mother all at the same time. That contrast is very powerful. Another thing that happened after the birth was the name of the baby, which Philip picked baby A, literally just the letter A, which that was really weird. But maybe he doesn't want to give like a full name, or maybe he doesn't want to give his last name or something to the baby. Honestly, I don't understand why he named baby A, like A as in A B C D, like letters of the alphabet. That makes me think like maybe he wants to keep having children with her and name them A B C D. I don't know if it's some kind of like game for him, or if he's planning something towards the future with using the A. I really don't understand. But eventually, JC is now a mother, and obviously, motherhood changes her focus a lot. She becomes exhausted all the time because the baby just won't sleep through the night, which is something very normal with babies. Um, but for a 14-year-old, it's not normal. She sometimes feels very overwhelmed and even frustrated with her own baby. And, she feels very guilty because she's having these feelings, and it just this part just feels important because it humanizes her. And just having to think about how she gave birth at such a young age, and just knowing that some people struggle so much with having a baby when they're an adult. So now you have to picture her being 14 years old, having a baby, all while being in captivity and being controlled by two individuals. And parenting is harder and under any normal conditions, but she is doing it all alone. She's being watched constantly, and she is still experiencing trauma despite having a baby. Even though Philip didn't force her to have sex while she was pregnant, he was still telling her to do sexual and inappropriate things to him while she was pregnant and naked for him to see. So she was still experiencing a lot of trauma despite her not being sexually assaulted. But the good thing is that through all of that, her love is very clear, and she never once gave up on her daughter. Now, we go to another chapter, which is about Sergeant or Sarge, which is a bird that Nancy brings over to JC because a friend of Nancy's and her son weren't taking care of the baby and they wanted to get rid of it, so they asked Nancy if she wanted to take it to her house. So Nancy thought it would be a good idea. That way JC could feel a little bit of joy, maybe not feel so alone. So Nancy brought the bird into the room and showed it to JC, and the bird was in really bad shape, and it was really scared. And if you try to even like get close or touch it, it would just go crazy. And Nancy told JC, so don't touch the bird or don't get close to it because he will hurt you. But JC didn't care. Um, she was planning on teaching it how to talk. That way that she could have somebody else to talk to and she wouldn't feel so alone. And, this just shows her desire for connection beyond her captors. So eventually, she got the bird to be more comfortable around her. She would put her hand in, and when the bird would go to just kind of fight her, she would be like, no, like, don't do that. And the bird eventually started to trust her. And she loved having the bird. She could talk to the bird. She didn't feel as alone as she did before. But eventually, Nancy forgot one day because the bird would stay outside during the day, and then at night she would bring the bird inside with JC so that it could sleep inside with her. And Nancy forgot one night. The bird stayed out way past the time that it should have stayed out. And it was freezing cold. Once the Nancy remembered to bring the bird back inside, it was a little too late. The bird managed to survive for a bit, but in the morning when JC woke up, the bird was just gone. And you know, she she just felt completely devastated. Um, it just shows how even anything that brings comfort is just temporary. Nothing lasts beyond, just a few weeks if at most. Now, Nancy starts avoiding her afterward because she feels guilty that the bird is dead. And she did JC did blame Nancy for the death of the bird. But what could she do? What could she do? She couldn't do anything against Nancy because she was being held captive by her and her husband. So it's not much that she can do in this situation, but just, you know, understand that these things just keep happening to her over and over again. Now, as her daughter begins to grow, JC becomes very hyper aware. So JC is now the daughter A is now 3 years old, and JC is now turning 17 as well. And her fear shifts from herself over to her child because she learns that Philip is actually filming young girls at playgrounds. So he would go over with Nancy to playgrounds and just film little girls playing around. He would even sometimes talk to them and tell them to do like the splits, or if they were doing some kind of sitting position or anything, he would tell them to open their legs up so he could take pictures of them. And then that's when she realized that his behavior hasn't stopped at all, because before finding that out, he had actually mentioned how God had helped him with his problem and that he no longer had to sexually assault JC anymore or use her body because his problem was now cured. He was a new person. He did not need her anymore. And she just realizes that his behavior hasn't stopped. It was just redirected someplace else. And knowing this, it just increases her anxiety because, in fear for her daughter, she's constantly watching out for signs of danger. And this is not survival, but in a different form. She's now protective over her daughter. Now, eventually, we find out that she is pregnant again at 17, and she discovers that she's pregnant again, and she just feels very tired. She already knows what childbirth feels like. She knows what the sleepless nights feel like. She knows what the having to deal with a child in captivity feels like. So now she is deeply afraid to tell Philip. She doesn't know how he's going to react. She doesn't know if he wants a second baby. She doesn't know if she's going to be causing a problem for him in this situation. And she doesn't want that. She doesn't want to set him off in any way. So she goes over to him and she tells him that, oh, I'm pregnant. I think I have another baby. And when she does, he actually reacts very positively. He frames it in a way that's like, God knows that this is what I need. Which was very disturbing to me. And also because he said that he knows that it's gonna be a girl. That was also disturbing because why does he want it to be a girl so bad? And then I start to think about how his attention is not redirecting to younger girls at the playground, which makes me fear for JC's daughter A and now for maybe her next daughter, it was just very disturbing. But she just knows what this means for her. It means more responsibility, more risk, more fear, and while still being in captivity, she's always alone all the time with her kids now, so no support from Philip and Nancy. So she knows that it's not going to be easy going forward, but the love that she has for her daughter and now for her unborn daughter just never dies down, and she continues with her life. So um this section highlighted adaptation, how humans kind of adjust even while in traumatic instances, and identity suppression, because her name, her freedom, her history are all being controlled. um it shows motherhood um kind of as resistance, because loving her children becomes an act of emotional survival. um it also shows a lot of isolation, distortion, because you know emotional responses become very complicated in captivity, and obviously resilience. It's not like dramatic resilience, but it's the fact that she hasn't given up despite having to deal with a baby, um, the loss of the bird, obviously the loss of freedom she's had for all of her young life since she's been 11 and she was kidnapped by Philip and Nancy. It doesn't show very dramatically in this section, but it's very steady throughout the whole book. So now, um, from Easter all the way to her second pregnancy, her story becomes a lot about endurance, in a different form, because she is obviously not only surviving abuse anymore, now she's raising her children in confinement and around the abuse that she's actively going through. She's still protecting them while still being trapped. She's very exhausted, she's tired, she's afraid, but she's still moving forward. I think that what stood out to me the most is that resilience doesn't always look very loud. Like I said, sometimes it looks like, waking up every day, yet continuing. And even when you feel overwhelmed, because JC was always overwhelmed with her children, um that is what the chapters show, and that's what make them extremely um powerful and um strong. I think that I haven't read the rest of the book. I don't know if she has any more children yet. Um, but honestly, I do wonder how the dynamic is gonna go towards the next chapters when the other baby has finally arrived. And I'm curious to see what happens to baby A and the second baby in the future, because I don't think that Philip just redirecting his attention somewhere else means anything good. I do wonder if perhaps JC is now getting too old for him, to grown in a way. Maybe he's only gonna use her for more children, and maybe that's why she can no longer help him with his problem, because in the book he mentioned that I won't need to hurt you anymore because God has helped me with my problem. And obviously, that the problem like that is not gonna go away. It's not like God could get rid of his problem. So I wonder if that's a reason why he got rid of his problem, because as the babies are coming in, for example, baby A is growing up, she's 3 years old now, maybe he is going to start redirecting his attention instead of the videos of the girls that he has. on the playgrounds, but rather to his own daughter in the future. And that's just very disturbing for me to think about. I hope it doesn't happen, but knowing the type of person he is, I think it could definitely be a possibility. And I just hope that he doesn't have that doesn't happen, because the trauma wouldn't just be on JC but not her own child, and that is deeply disturbing.